Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Finovate podcast. Joining me today, we have Mary Ellen Iskenderian, President and CEO of Women's World Banking. Mary Ellen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Greg.
So as we like to do at this show, I'd like to start by asking you to give us a quick introduction of yourself and what Women's World Banking is all about.
Well, Women's World Banking is celebrating its 45th anniversary this year. We are a global NGO that works with both financial service providers and governments across the global south to make sure that women have access to the full range of financial services that they need for security and prosperity. We are also, however, an impact investor for the last 15 years or so and have a portfolio of inclusive finance institutions that we've made direct equity investments in.
Yeah, really cool. And we'll definitely be talking about some of those companies that you've made investments in. But as we get started, and again, there's no shortage of things we could talk about, but I think something that's really going to resonate with a lot of the fintech innovators who listen to this show is going to be a conversation around data. And anybody who's been paying attention should be aware of the way that biased data is having detrimental effects on new technologies, on artificial intelligence. What's your perspective on how big of a problem this kind of imperfect data is when it comes to financial data for women specifically?
Well, it's one of these problems that it is very significant. It is a large problem, but it's really this huge missed opportunity is what we are typically seeing, that the data that is going into particularly credit scoring algorithms. That's where we're working largely with women entrepreneurs who have small and medium-sized enterprises. The data that goes into lenders' scoring algorithms either don't take women's data into consideration or analyze data about women in ways that sort of bumps them down on the credit worthiness. And so you're seeing lenders leaving a lot of really good women-led businesses, on the rejection pile rather than providing them with credit.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know, just to kind of clarify, we're talking about entrepreneurs specifically, women who are trying to start businesses, lacking the credit to be able to go out and be successful there. Can you talk a little bit about, what that kind of ripple effect looks like when these businesses don't get funded? What kind of impact can that have on the societies that those women are coming from?
I'm so glad you asked that question because we definitely have seen both in the companies that we've worked with and the companies that we've invested in, that when a woman has access to financial resources and maybe even more importantly control over the financial resources that are coming into the household, everybody in that household actually is living better in a sense. They tend to spend more money on healthcare. More kids, both girls and boys, go to school. We see more nutritious foods eaten by everybody in the family. We see better house improvements. Women are more likely to spend money on improving the household. So it's really in everybody's best interest for a woman who's made that initial investment in a business to allow her to grow. Women are much more likely to be hiring other women. So when jobs are created, they tend to be other women's jobs. So it's a very virtuous circle and knock-on effect.
Yeah, and I think this is where you start to see the potential societal benefits are massive. So, here's where let's bring the fintech industry into the conversation. What are you seeing in terms of the ways that fintech can help correct this problem, help bring some data into the equation that's really sorely needed?
Well, when, the fintech industry just sort of started bursting on the scene, we got very excited because, first of all, there is something like a $7 trillion lending gap for women-led small and medium-sized enterprises. And the legacy financial system, almost can't get out of its own way. There's, collateral requirements. There are, kind of antiquated credit underwriting mechanisms. And so we saw this fintechs that could move faster, that could look at a broad array of data and analyze it to determine credit worthiness and not get hung up on some of the old mechanisms of the past. But as we've seen, that sometimes that's where the bias kind of gets in the way, because the algorithms can only be as good as the humans that are deriving them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of those things that a lot of people in the fintech space are really excited about, the idea that some of the solutions that come out of it can have this kind of really significant impact on major problems that exist around the globe. So let's talk about more about what you're doing, what Women's World Banking is doing in the fintech space. What are some of the initiatives you're working on in and around fintech?
So, as I mentioned, we work as a nonprofit organization providing a lot of guidance and advice to financial service providers on product design, on how to roll out products, on how to market them, what's the best channel. So we have a number of fintechs that we've done quite a bit of work with on specifically on their credit scoring algorithms. If they are using cell phone data to derive that algorithm, are they making sure that they're looking at women's data? In some countries that we work in, there can be up to a 15 or 20% gender gap in smartphone ownership. So if you're looking at a sample pool of data that doesn't even have women cell phone owners in it, then you're absolutely not designing with their data in mind. What we're also seeing is, our research team got behind some of the most popular credit scoring apps out there. And what we're clearly seeing is any piece of data that can be collected is being collected. And so I think we have to think more broadly than just financial data. For example, we're seeing, GPS data is playing a bigger and bigger role in the way lenders think about creditworthiness. A woman is far more likely to have a home-based business and to spend lots of time in that home, but we've seen several and working on that business, but we've seen many algorithms that give, sort of extra points for time spent away from home and at a business. So making the assumption that the business is separate from the home. And so the woman gets penalized as a result when she shouldn't be, and the data should be analyzed differently.
Yeah, I love that example because, again, it's so easy to see it when you kind of look at it with that critical lens and think, wait, how can that possibly be a strike against you? So let's talk about some of the companies that are in your portfolio. As you kind of have gone into this investment mode, are there any companies that you'd like to highlight who are doing exceptional work?
Oh, yeah, so many. I mean, we had our first fund was $50 million fund. We made 10 investments in some pretty traditional microfinance institutions. But our second $100 million fund has been almost exclusively in the fintech space. One of the companies that immediately comes to mind for me is a company in Kenya called Pezesha. They are an embedded finance platform that provides sort of the full service of credit and other business applications to some very small, I'd say going even beyond small down to micro businesses. And what we were very excited for them, and this is really the big news, is Safaricom, which is the largest cell phone provider in Kenya. They were the company that founded the mobile money system M-Pesa, which many people know of as really the granddaddy of them all in terms of digital financial services. They've now partnered with Pezesha to provide loans to the hundreds and thousands of small micros and small businesses on the Safaricom platform. So we're super excited about that opportunity for scale that's kind of landed in their lap. And we've been providing them a lot of support. Sometimes, scale is it can be a curse before it is a blessing, and so we're just wanting to make sure that the company has all of the right systems in place and all of the right people in place to support that kind of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges of the fintech, it can't be when you grow too quickly. We've certainly seen companies come across our stage who've fallen into that pitfall before. But as you look at the broader ecosystem, you look kind of outside of the companies that you're investing in, where do you see the biggest opportunities in terms of what new types of technologies you'd like to see? And this is basically, if you could kind of imagine your own ideal fintech company, somebody comes knocking on your door and saying, "Hey, we've got this cool solution." What does that new solution look like in your kind of ideal world?
So I think as the world is becoming, more and more complex, as we're seeing, quite frankly, the effects of climate change hitting so many different elements of businesses and frankly, people in the global south and women and children in particular are quite vulnerable to the shocks of climate change. It's more important than ever for solutions to be to be bundled, to be taking both, you know, giving women the resilience of a savings account and the access to maybe emergency credit in the event of a natural disaster. There is still massive underinsurance of the population that we work in, and yet we're seeing so many businesses affected by natural disasters. So that idea of a bundled product is something that I think is so well suited to the fintech operating models. But I think we're still seeing a little bit more silo in the fintech space. But that I'm hoping we'll be able to kind of leap over and into that more multi-product environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at this from a very high level, what do you see as the biggest hurdle preventing, some of these opportunities from being realized, preventing women from being able to get the funding that they need to start their businesses, or potentially preventing people in the fintech space from being able to bring products like you're describing into the ecosystem? What do you think are some of the really big challenges that we have to overcome in order to start to make significant progress in either of those areas?
Well, I guess I'd say it's a couple of things. First is, the real promise of fintech was just not getting bogged down, as we were saying earlier, by some of the issues that have held back the legacy formal financial institutions. So, for example, I don't think I've ever met a woman entrepreneur in the countries we work in that hasn't complained about collateral and in fact over collateral requirements of the banks. In many of the developing markets that we work in, collateral is only land or built property, which a low-income woman is very unlikely to have title to or to be able to pledge. And so to see fintechs kind of implying some of those same requirements seems like really missed opportunity. You've got that algorithm. You can establish good data, good understanding of the cash flow and other metrics for that company. Don't get bogged down with the same legacy issues. I do see at the same time, though, issues around data privacy, data protection are particularly important to women. The Bank for International Settlements, which is nobody's idea of a bastion of feminist finance, did a piece that showed that women were much more likely than men to be willing to pay more for a financial product or service if they knew that it had digital safety attached to it and if their data would be protected. So I think fintechs, again, can go a long way to building that really important trust that any financial service provider needs to build, but you need maybe even just a little bit more when you're trying to serve women, by recognizing the unique positives of fintech, and again, not getting bogged down in some of the issues that were real problems in creating trust with the legacy systems.
Yeah, I think trust is key in so many different areas here. And obviously, it's something that is even more of a concern if you're, I don't want to say used to it, nobody gets used to it, but if your experiences so far have been that you're ignored, that you're
Yeah.
discounted, all of a sudden this becomes even more important. So, As everybody in the fintech space knows, trust is paramount, but especially in this kind of situation. So I think we have time for one more question here. And as you look broadly at what's required for improving financial inclusion for women, helping women create businesses all over the world, but especially in the global South, do you feel like the answer is likely to come from regulators, policy, or legislation, or is it more likely to come from innovation or people realizing the potential market opportunity that comes from being able to access this new group of customers? Or does it have to kind of be both sides working together in partnership?
Oh, I am a firm believer in the both sides answer. And a lot of that comes from a leadership and diversity for regulators program that Women's World Banking has run for the last 5 years, together with the Said Business School at Oxford, where we train. Yes, we provide leadership training for regulators from the global South, banking, central banks, insurance commissioners, pension commissioners, planning ministries, finance ministries. But we're also providing quite a bit of technical training. And while they're with us, it's a 12-week virtual and in-person hybrid class. The regulators have to bring it, and they come in pairs, have to bring an initiative that will contribute to women's financial inclusion in their country. And I've been so impressed with the kinds of ideas they're bringing. The Central Bank of Bahamas, for example, had a team a couple of years ago, and they brought their central bank currency, CBDC, with them, the sand dollar, as their initiative, but very specifically trying to make the product more accessible, more understandable for a low-income population, so that they too could enjoy the benefits of that stable coin. Just last year, we had a fantastic project brought by the National Bank of Rwanda, but again, in conjunction with the private sector and some fintechs in their market, because they were seeing that the National Credit Bureau only had 5% of the data that it collected was pertaining to women and women's creditworthiness or women's payments, whereas 90% of the adult women in Rwanda had had digital data that was generated through their use of cell phones. And so their project was, how do we get that digital data into the formal credit bureau? And they knew that they had to work with industry in order to make that to really make that work.
Yeah, no, I think these are some really good examples. And again, just underscoring the value of that kind of partnership. I'm afraid we have to leave it here, but for anybody who's interested in learning more, I would encourage you to check out Women's World Banking. And for people who might be listening who have innovations that they'd like to demo at a show, or at one of our shows coming up this year, keep in mind we do have scholarships for startups that are founded by women or founded by people of color, or that focus on ESG type initiatives. You can learn more about those scholarships at finovate.com. Just click on the show that you're interested in. And of course, Finovate is also a great place to come and hear women like Mary Ellen talk about some of the challenges that women face. We're very proud of the fact that 50% of the speakers at our shows are women. We really do our best to highlight all of those different voices. So again, Mary Ellen, it's been an absolute pleasure hearing a little bit from you about the challenges that you're facing and the strong work that you're doing. Thank you again for joining me.
Oh, thank you again. It's been a really great conversation. Thank you.
The Finovate podcast is produced by Informa Connect in association with Provoke.fm Media. Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.